And back then I meditated and I woke up in her hospital room energetically, of course, because she was 750 miles away from me. And her body just started talking with me, and she would breathe in and breathe me in through her system. And I'd go through the nervous system and she'd spit me back out in the chair. I'd go through the cardiovascular system and she'd spit me back out in the chair. And by the time we were done, I just said goodbye. I woke up back in my house and it was 3 days later and I had all these notebooks of information. So that was kind of the first time, but it's really evolved since then. In the last 10 years, I'm going to say it's really just a conversation with God and your body and what's going on and where does it start. And, he made it very clear from the beginning that there are so many things that we have go on that are traumas, that are stressors. That's where that thoughts, feelings, and emotions come in for me, that create problems in the body. So we have I'm going to call that our emotional trash, right? But then we also have all this physical trash from pesticides and chemicals and all of these things. So from the start, for me, it was always about detoxification was always the first step. So anybody that's followed me, literally every MP3 or live call that started off a series always started with what? Some sort of a detox, because that was always so important. And this series isn't going to be any different. There's new and different things that have really come up for autoimmunes. But literally, this is, for me, it's just like having a conversation. Just like we're having a conversation here, I'm conversing with your body, I'm conversing with God, and he's showing me exactly what is going on in your body and whether it's a physical thing that started it, an infection, environmental issue, emotional issue, where are the issues that are at the root. Because even though they may not seem like they're the problem. And when we do autoimmunes, I'm going to say to you a lot of times, okay, so before your symptoms started when you were 14, what was going on emotionally? Because a lot of times you had chicken pox or you had mono, that kicked things off. Or you had some sort of an experience where boys in school maybe tried to pin you to the floor and touch you inappropriately. That can kick things off. I call that an insult to the body. So there's a lot of different insults that can actually kick off the beginnings of an autoimmune. So a lot of times these are the things that God will take me back to in your body, and you'll be scratching your head going, why are we going back to that point? But we have to clean up that point to be able to clean up everything that goes on after that.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it feels like the more I dig into this, it's almost like humanity's going through a little bit of a purge.
Mm.
And it's it's not coming out like from the skies or from the earth per se. It's coming through us. And this is where I see a lot of people having to deal with health changes that are rooted in something that needs to be released, needs to be evolved or awakened into. And if you don't know how to do it or you don't know what's going on, it can seem like everything is falling apart. Are you seeing that more and more, Lynn? And if so, tell me, what are some examples you're seeing?
Um, we're going to start with the thing that's the surprise that I promised for this,
Oh,
and that is,
okay.
why do 80% of autoimmune people that have autoimmune diagnoses, why are 80% of them women?
Hmm.
So that's a huge question. So you think about, well, what's different about a woman? Why does a woman, why is that created with her? So the first piece of that is we have hormones unlike men. So yes, we can say that, just because you have an X chromosome, it's no different than X versus Y. There's not a whole lot of difference, but there is. We have periods, we have cycles, we have childbirth, we have postpartum, we have perimenopause, we have menopause. We have all these different hormonal changes. And there is a lot of women that it's after childbirth or after postpartum that all of a sudden an autoimmune will kick in. After perimenopause, that's when it'll kick in. In fact, most people with autoimmunes are between the ages of 40 and 55 in
Mm.
that same time frame as perimenopause. I'm sure everybody out there is going right now. All the women on the call,
How many
right?
of y'all are in that time frame right now? I'm just
Yeah.
curious, show of hands. Yeah.
But here's another piece to that. So in that same kind of time frame, what's our divorce rate these days? A lot of women in that same time frame are being now kicked into divorce, where now they're their sole breadwinner, maybe even caretakers to children still at home, right? So they have this added emotional piece that and stressor that they have to deal with. And a lot of them now have to take care of aging parents. So are you getting a nice theme here? Another piece to this is that women, their stress levels are higher than most men, and mainly because we are basically taught from the get-go that we are the caregivers, right? So at our expense, at our health, our mental health, physical health, emotional health, we have to put the kids first, put the husband first, put the parents first, put everybody else first. So this is actually to the detriment of our own bodies a lot of times. So that helps the dysregulation. Another one is trauma. I don't know what the stats are. I didn't look it up, but how many women have some sort of trauma from childhood? Whether it's neglect, abandonment, some sort of inappropriate sexual encounter, all of these traumas. There's certain people in the functional medicine world that say that that is the absolute key to autoimmunes, is these traumas are the very first insult. In fact, they call it ACE, adverse childhood experiences, that those are what kick these off. Okay. But I have two other ones that I find more fascinating than even those. And the first one is women have two X chromosomes, and the second X is disabled. And so basically only one is used, right? But the way that it's disabled is called an X chromosome inactivation. And this can sometimes lead to impaired and disfigured molecules, which then your body, your immune system says, wait a minute, what is this? And it gives it a reason to attack. So isn't that interesting that what is kicking off the fact that the way that one of our X chromosomes is turned off would actually make our own bodies attack ourselves? I mean, that's fascinating to me. The other one answers, for me, that whole childbirth and postpartum issue, is that there's a thing called fetal microchimerism. And anytime a woman gets pregnant, now this is if you have a miscarriage, even if you don't know you had a miscarriage, if you became pregnant at all, whether you had a miscarriage, whether you had an abortion, or whether you had a live birth, if you were pregnant, that DNA of that child goes into the mother's body, and it's supposed to stay maybe for a couple of months. But there's a lot of women that it especially goes to the brain, and it stays their entire lives. So now you have a foreign DNA that is in your body, in your bloodstream, and lands in certain organs. And then that can kick off some autoimmunes. So this is kind of like one of my surprises in terms of women. I didn't think that the women would be like, oh yeah, I got that one. I knew exactly what's causing my autoimmune. But these are some examples of some of the crazy things that goes on in our body that it's really hard for medical science to really pinpoint for women.
Yeah, that is amazing. And you mentioned that 100 years ago, some of this wasn't really going on, but now it's accelerating. What do you see as like one of the reasons that 100 years ago this wasn't happening? Is it a cascade of events like environmental toxins, gut issues, hormonal issues, and of course, like, non-native hormonal issues like xenoestrogen and all sorts of things that didn't exist 100 years ago, and kind of creating this perhaps cascade?
And why didn't those exist 100 years ago, Darius? And that will answer your own question.
Well, we lived in a, a much more natural environment for the most part,
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So a lot of functional medicine people today will call autoimmunes a lifestyle disease.
Mm.
And it's lifestyle because we have so much poisons in our foods. We have so much poisons that we're identified with on a daily basis, chemicals. Like I live on a farm, and I've tried every possible fly spray that is essential oils and just magic in a bottle to keep my cattle from just being,
Eaten
have
alive.
flies all over
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And I have yet to find something that completely works and keeps them so that they're not going nuts in the summer in Florida and in the humidity we have. So there's, to some degree, we all have some chemicals that we have to deal with. And in the survey, what was interesting this morning, we just did the survey for anybody who purchases this. And these were some of the questions that I came up with on the survey. And some of them were kind of surprising. How many chemicals do you have around? Does your house have carpet in it? Carpet is a huge problem in terms of the PFAS, the forever chemicals and things like that that are in the carpet. Here's one that I really found fascinating, because I have a friend who's been suffering with some autoimmunes for about the last 3 years. And she bought a manufactured home 4 years ago. And I never realized that manufactured homes are made with so much formaldehyde and all of these forever chemicals when they're put together, that a lot of women, especially that live in a manufactured home, something like 90% will develop autoimmunes. And I just found that astounding.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow. Yeah.
Mold, I'll ask you, is there any presence of mold? Because that can kick it off. Do you live near chemicals, industry, or nuclear plants? Do you live near any power lines or cell towers? Here's one that I really want everybody to consider. Whatever you put on your skin, would you put it in your mouth and ingest it? If you wouldn't ingest it, don't put it on your skin, because your skin is your largest organ and it absorbs everything. So all of these fake cosmetics that they've been selling women for years and years and years are just horrific. And I'll give you another one. I had a friend that was having some urinary incontinency issues after menopause and started looking at the women's pee pads. Oh my Lord. Do you know the chemicals that are in women's maxi pads these days for your cycle, or the pee pads for urinary incontinence? It's horrific. Absolutely. So here you have a mucous membrane that literally is like a sponge and soaks anything in that you put down there. That's the reason why a year or so ago I tattled on Lululemon and how they had forever chemicals in the crotch lining of their athletic wear. For that same reason, all these things literally just go right into the mucous membranes. And so we're really poisoning ourselves. You're thinking that, it's not my shoulders, I'm not getting sunburn, but that's actually worse because it
Yeah.
just soaks everything in. Another one is your water. A lot of people filter their water to drink it, but what about your water to shower? All those same chemicals and everything, or heavy metals or whatever it is, go through your skin.
And
So
especially if we take really warm or hot showers, what does
exactly.
hot, heat do? It opens up the pores, so then we absorb all of that in
And
more
are you
so. Yeah.
drinking out of plastic bottles still, or
Yeah.
plastic cups? So that's the reason why they call this lifestyle, because there are things that we can change. We can somewhat change our stress levels and our traumas in terms of what situations we may or may not put ourselves in. And I'm not saying that people cause their own trauma, but I'm saying there are certain ones where it's like, if you're in a bad relationship and you're, being beaten, let's get out of that situation. Let's change it, right? So there are, in some instances, ways that we can make choices and change this. Even with the foods we eat, are you reading labels? And I'll tell you, my latest one is supplements. So I'm hoping that you guys are reading the news, seeing the latest. But in the last, I'm going to say 6 months or more, I have just stopped taking almost all supplements, because they have just been finding that there is just absolute trash in these supplements. If you're not on my Facebook group, please go, because I've been putting a ton of stuff up lately. Even Dr. Group, who was a
Hmm.
huge functional medicine doctor that stood out during the pandemic, is even ivermectin now. They're very concerned about the sources of it, because pharmaceutical companies are the ones that are starting to make it. And they're putting nanoparticles and other things in the ivermectin. So, and Amazon, I've already said, a lot of the ones on Amazon are
Yes.
literally, they're fake. They look like the companies that maybe you're used to, but they're not. They're fake.
Mm.
So we just need to be so careful these days about what we put on our skin and in our mouth.
Yeah, I'll share a personal story. My wife Sherry was taking so many different supplements recently. She stopped about 4 months ago, but she's taking tons of supplements, and she went to a functional, medicine doctor, and they found through the testing that like she just was not absorbing any of it. It was causing a lot of stress issues and toxicity. And since she cut a lot of that out, in fact, about 95% of it, her blood work is way better. Everything is way better because these things had, like you said, a lot of things in there that weren't getting absorbed, that weren't, what she needed. And it was just causing overload trying to process all of that. So yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And it's interesting you mentioned like if you're in an abusive relationship, right, get out of it. Well, what if you did 30 years ago, but maybe the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, or maybe it was a parenting issue where your mom and dad treated you a certain way, or something that yes, you're not in that situation physically right now, but for some of us, it's still playing every day, every moment in some way, shape, or form. And they're reliving it as if it's happening now. I mean, that's what I've learned through hypnosis that for a lot of people, they are living it right now as if it is still happening, at least in their energy field.
That happens all the time. And that is one of the biggest uh, problems and the biggest contributors to autoimmunes.
Mm,
So, what people need to realize is that, a lot of people want to point to genetics when it comes to autoimmunes. Only 30%, and honestly, that's their number. My number is 10% that I get from the bodies are
okay.
actual genetics. And the reason why is because you can have 15 different genetic markers for autoimmunes, but it doesn't get um, it doesn't get transcribed without a trigger. And the trigger is going to be one of three things: environmental, infection, or emotional. So here's your trauma issue, right? That falls under the emotional piece. So those are the triggers.
Can you say
So
those again, Lynn? Environmental?
environmental, so like
Okay.
microplastics, heavy
Okay.
metals, chemicals, infections. So like COVID loves to kick off a storm of immunes, and that's autoimmunes, and that's the reason why we see so many. But Epstein-Barr, Lyme's, uh, chicken pox, anything in the herpes family, they all love to kick off autoimmunes.
Mm,
And then emotional, which is those stressors and those traumas. So something in that category will trigger that DNA to be kicked off and turned on. Okay.
mm,
Another piece that is a huge piece to this is leaky gut. And so we have to address leaky gut. So the gut lining is only one cell thick. That's it. And it has these very tight junctions because it is one cell thick. But these things can be disrupted, and there's something called zonulin. And when the zonulin gets too high, then they kind of relax and leave gaps. So you have to remember what goes in your mouth is like a tube from your mouth to your anus, right? So really that's what when you eat, that's outside your body. Isn't that kind of fascinating to think? So when you eat, even though it goes down in here, it's outside of your body. It's still in the tube. Okay. And then once it gets to the intestines, if that gap is open, now things, proteins, bacteria, whatever, that aren't digested and aren't absorbed properly can get through. And where does it go? It goes right into the tissues, right into the bloodstream, get taken around. So then the body goes, wait a minute, I don't know what this foreign protein is, but I don't like it. So now it categorizes that protein as something that's a problem, and it starts to attack to get rid of it, right? But now anytime you eat something else and it has a similar signature to that protein, guess what? It says, I'm going to attack that too. So a lot of times when people start this kind of process, all of a sudden they have these allergies that pop up. Like 2 days ago, I was only allergic to peanuts. Now today I'm allergic to peanuts and broccoli. Now tomorrow I'm allergic to peanuts, broccoli, and something else. And it's because those proteins are similar enough that the body kind of categorizes them all together, and it starts this cascade of allergy type symptoms. So that's kind of how this can start, on top of all the other problems if you have gut problems. But that is the leaky gut. So they have found that like 98% of people that have autoimmunes also have leaky gut. So this is that layers that we were talking about before we started the call and the pre-call, where this autoimmunes are not simple. This is not just one thing. You fell and you broke your leg. Boom. There's one thing, right? You know what happened? You fell. It broke. Game over, right? We know what caused this. This is so layered. Possible genetics, possible trigger, possible leaky gut. And I had mentioned earlier about insults. So sometimes when you're a child, and let's say somebody did inappropriately sexually touch you, right? Let's say you had chickenpox. It can be either of those, right? So the body then kind of categorizes as that's an insult. And it just kind of holds on to that, right?
Hmm.
But then later in life, something else happens that now all of a sudden just it's almost like a bully, and it comes and it kicks that insult and says, pushes that button, says, okay, I'm turning you on now. And now all of a sudden, all kinds of things just blow up. So for some reason, the body keeps hold of these little insults that then all of a sudden one day just go kaboom. And there you have an autoimmune storm where things trigger. If anybody here has fibromyalgia and all of a sudden you get a flare up, why did it just flare right now? If anybody has MS and you get a flare up, there's an example.
Right. Wow. Wow. And there's so many things happening right now energetically with people and just kind of in our world, in our environment, in our relationships, in our sensitivity as we're, able to pick up more these days. I think a lot of us probably would say we're a lot more sensitive than we were in the sense of we can decipher and infer and feel into energies and things happening. Lynn, for those wondering, what does autoimmune look like? Because for some of us, it may seem like it's a huge thing, like, oh, okay, I have this definite symptom, but what are some of the signs that you've run across?
So some of the most common ones, and you guys have, I've already seen a bunch of them in the chat over here, fatigue. And
Okay.
here's another problem is these symptoms all seem so unrelated that when you go to a normal Western medicine type doctor,
Hmm.
then there's a pill for each separate one rather than looking at the whole spectrum of them. And that's what my big issue with it is. But fatigue, how many of you have fatigue? Maybe you've had it for a couple weeks, maybe you've had it for 20 years.
Right.
No matter how much you rest, joint aches and pains and stiffness.
And
And
see,
so when
these are
those,
things like Lynn that someone say, well, yeah, I'm tired, but you don't understand. I'm working a lot of hours. I've got this issue with my
exactly.
kids, or I've been working a lot. And so you just kind of put it aside. I'm getting older. Of course, my joints are going to bother me. That's how my grandma and my mom felt.
There's a
Interesting.
good justification for each
Right.
of them, but you need to start looking at them as a cluster
Mm,
rather than just individual symptoms. And that will help you. Digestive problems, food sensitivities, unexplained weight changes. Here's another most common one: brain fog, mood swings, and memory problems. I don't know anybody today who doesn't feel like they have some of those, especially since COVID, especially since 5G, right? And that's another big stressor on the body is 5G. Hair loss, a lot of people this spring talking about hair loss problems. Slow wound healing, dizziness, your blood pressure just kind of plummets. And right now, there is an epidemic of blood pressure going through the roof. I probably have seen 20 people in a week where all of a sudden it's just uncontrolled blood pressure. Muscle weakness and even the tingling. What about everybody wants to say, oh, I have neuropathy. All of a sudden I have burning and
right.
tingling in my hands and feet. What if it's not? What if it's an autoimmune? And a lot of people since COVID have a flare, even if they knew what their symptoms were. Now all of a sudden they have a flare, or they have, it just seems to have multiplied. So what you need to understand is that everybody's different. So some people it shows up as a cortisol response. So literally that stress mode, it's like the gas pedal on the stress mode is on. And so cortisol is always pumping. Another one, it might be nervous system dysregulation. So how many of you feel like you're plugged in and your nervous system's,
Right.
and then you go to lay down and you're exhausted, but then you go to lay down and you can't go to sleep. So insomnia gets in there. Then you can have the immune system dysregulation, which is then when it really kicks into autoimmunes.
Okay. Well, we've kind of laid out a whole list of things. And I mean, for some, this may sound optimistic, but also kind of a little scary. But how do we use, what do we do through energy work, right? To balance out, like to find the happy place where, okay, these things are here. This is kind of the world we're in. But then how do we get on the other side of that and really begin to transform our lives out of some of these timelines and some of these possible future scenarios?
That's a great question, Darius. Um, it's not as difficult as we might think. So I
Yeah.
really want to make sure that people have hope. If you take the hope away, what's the use in being here? We got to have hope, and the bodies are resilient. So we're always going to start with that detox. We've got to work on um,
Detox. Okay.
parasites. We've got to work on Wi-Fi. We've got to work on all these chemicals we've been talking about. And remember, as Darius pointed out earlier, I'm not just asking today, like, where did you grow up?
Mm,
Did you grow up near a stream that, ended up being a dumping ground for some industry and you didn't realize that you had a chemical problem your whole life? A couple series ago, I remember that I didn't realize that being a swimmer my whole life had affected my body so much because of the chlorine. Literally, I mean, some days I trained 6 hours a day, so I'm in chlorinated water, like super chlorinated water, 6 hours a day for years and years and years. I didn't realize what an impact it was having. So we're not just going to look at, today, but back then. So we're going to work on, of course, all that detoxy kind of stuff. Another thing is we're going to work on these stresses and these traumas. So we've got to get to what kicked things off. And I've got a special way of kind of doing this, what trauma started the problem um, process, to
hmm
go back in time to that piece. And there's some people like Jill that put marital
hmm
separation. Some people know when it started.
Yep.
Like my symptoms started when I was 13. And what happened before that? Well, I just started my period right before that. Okay, interesting. Okay, I just had marital
Mm,
separation and relocation before
yep.
that. So a lot of times we know what the starter was, we just don't know how to get rid of it. So we're going to work on getting rid of that. But then we have so many other pieces. We're going to have pieces that are rebooting the immune system. What about chronic inflammation? I've told you guys this so often, that all of these problems then create chronic inflammation throughout the body. We've got to get rid of a bunch of that.
Okay.
We're going to be rebooting organs to make sure that they come back online. And we've got a bunch of different biohacks that we're going to work on as well, that I just love, because there's different things that we can do energetically with those autoantibodies. So we're going to work on anybody who has been diagnosed and has these autoantibodies. We're going to work on trying to pull those out. We have to work on hormone. And a really interesting one for me is your mitochondria. So
Mm,
everybody knows that your mitochondria is the little power cell inside each of your cells, right? Some have only one mitochondria in it, some cells, and other ones have tons. But if this doesn't make you want to stop stressing out over things, I don't know what else will. So please listen to this carefully. If you are in having, I'm going to call it a stress dump, right? Somebody just made you go into a tizzy about something, whether it's your husband, your wife, your work, your kids, whatever that is. When you go into one of those just stress blizzards, your cells, your mitochondria start dumping their DNA and RNA into the bloodstream, kicking off an immune response.
mm,
They just dump it. And it starts this immune response, which then starts, do you remember that term from COVID? Cytokine storm.
right.
It starts one of those massive inflammatory cytokine storms, which then can, guess what? Trigger an autoimmune. So we need to really get a hold of our stress. We need to figure that out. How do we stop getting stressed out so much about finances, or what our husband did or didn't do, what our kids did or didn't do? And
Mm,
we need to try to reel that back in, because that can literally create an autoimmune, especially in women.
wow. Wow. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Lynn, because we are going to be doing today a very special process for everybody. So you're going to want to stay on with us. We're going to be doing something called the mitochondrial mishaps. And we're going to be doing that probably in about 15 minutes or so. So stay with us. And Lynn, we have a lot of people with their hands raised and a lot of people maybe wanting to get a little bit of energy support, or just maybe like just to peep into what you are being shown perhaps. And as we do that, I'd invite everyone here, raise your hand, let us know what's going on with you. Again, we're not doctors, we're not offering medical advice, treatment, or guidance. Lynn's going to explain kind of how this comes in and what she sees, and maybe some things that could help you get to the root of that underlying thought, feeling, and emotion. And also, if you could write into the chat, let us know when you think maybe an autoimmune situation began in your life. We're already getting a lot of people writing in about when they believe it came in. Oftentimes, deep down, that insight, that first bit of wisdom that comes in, it may be the absolute area you can start to begin your healing journey with. And Lynn, I'd like to grab some callers if that's okay.
Of course.
All right, so we're going to go to some callers today, and got a bunch of people with their hands raised. So let Lynn know kind of what's going on. We don't need to get too much into the story, but we certainly want to help you. So I'm going to go with Jill, who had written in earlier. Jill, I'm going to send you an unmute request. You more than welcome to turn on your video or not. You don't have to, but how are you doing today? What's going on?
Um, I'm okay. I'm just really surprised that I found this call.
Oh, good.
I've just got on now, and so yeah, so I just had some blood test results back in, and
I
I'm
saw
just
that.
trying
Yeah.
to. I did have a doctor's appointment, but she was sick, so and in the notes she said, to come in and talk to me. So I've got stuff in my blood, and I went into A&E a couple of weeks ago because I had these spasms in the bottom of my leg, on my right leg, and I was so fatigued. I went for a day trip with a friend of mine to the seaside, in Brighton in
Mhm.
England, and I was really fatigued, and I started to get some heart palpitations, and I had been quite stressed, and then my leg started moving, sort of involuntary, like the muscles were spasming, and we were like, oh wow, that I've never seen anything like that before. So went to A&E. They couldn't tell me what it was. I had already been diagnosed with long COVID. I know a lot of people don't believe in long COVID, but I've had pathogens that have
Mhm.
obviously been upsetting me. And I've had a chronic cough, which seems to be getting better, but my blood has been showing up. My hormones have gone crazy, got high ferritin after having another virus in April. But I've had a lot of stress, and the stress factors have really kicked it in. And I am quite concerned because my leg's quite tight. And I know that I had a reaction, I think, to the jab, because when I took the jab, I literally went, oh, like that. I could just hear my lungs go. And I took another jab because I had to fly back to the UK. And I'm not really sure. I don't know. But I think that's possibly why after I had COVID, I've had fatigue and my cough got hugely worse. Um, but in the last month or 2 months, my stress has got quite
Mm.
full on. And I haven't been able to work as much as I'd like to. So I've had financial stress, moving stress, marital stress. Yeah, it's just been really difficult and really challenging for me. And I haven't found my feet. So, yeah, so if there's any way I could be given, I was thinking today I need to do a detox. I need to do something serious. Maybe I was wondering if I could walk myself out of this and just
Mm.
start walking and walking and walking. And I'm not sure, I'm sure it's quite simple, but I'm not sure.
Well, Jill, the thing is, you do have what they would call long COVID, and long COVID. There's so many people that are suffering from it, and there's so many different variations of it. But for you, we're going to work on a couple things here. One is you have a situation of some microclots. So because of spike protein, because of things in the vaccine, they create these, I mean, very tiny, hard to even see except for in certain situations and certain scans, but microclotting. And that's part of what is creating some of the spasms in that one leg, as well as you are low on magnesium. So we're going to pull in some magnesium. We're going to start cleaning some of the blood out. But you also have a lot of cortisol from that's just flushing from all of this stress.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happens, that also creates a lot of the fatigue. But so does microclotting, because then you're not getting enough oxygen to all the different parts of the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which then can create fatigue.
Mm.
So we are working, and for everybody that's on the call, we're just kind of working on this for everybody. So we're trying to calm down those adrenals, pull down some of that cortisol, reduce some of that stress, raise up some magnesium. You also have an imbalance in your potassium, which isn't helping. So the magnesium and potassium were also what's creating some of those heart palpitations.
Mm-hmm.
And working on cleaning out some of that blood.
Mm. Okay, Jill, we're going to let that keep running. And then I want to go to another caller. We do move sometimes quick, so I know we're getting close to doing our process. I want to go to Dr. Liz Wheeler. So let me grab Dr. Liz here. Hi, Dr. Liz. How are you today? See if I can get you. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure can. How are you?
Okay, I'm fine today. Um, what I need is I realized after Lynn was talking that I started out with having migraines when I was about in oh 12th. I was in junior high school, so seventh to eighth grade, I started having real bad migraines, and I had them for ever and ever until I went through menopause. And then after that, I had a stroke and I was totally paralyzed on the right hand side of my body. And I got over that pretty much.
Wow.
And then 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with melanoma. And my cancer looked like it was gone completely. And then the other day, a new melanoma popped up. So at the same time, I got my doctoral degree and I teach at the higher education level online. So I have a lot of problems.
Hmm.
All right, so we're going to take a look at some of the hormonal pieces of this, as well as work on that melanoma. And I'm glad we're cleaning out the blood for Jill, because we're also going to use that for you.
Wonderful.
Do you feel, Dr. Liz, there was a time when all this began? You said going way, way back when you started getting migraines?
I think so. When Lynn was talking about something that happened during childhood, and I suffered from those migraines until I was about 65, and I think that's when it all started, really.
So your body's also pointing, though, Dr. Liz, to something that you were eating back then as well. How has your digestion been, or how was it when you were around junior high age?
I ate the school cafeteria food.
What about mom? So was it kind of the boxed pasta and boxed macaroni and all that kind of stuff?
Not really, though. No, not really. My grandmother came to live with us at that time because my mom had I have a daughter, sister that's 11 years younger than me. So my grandmother made everything from scratch. So she was and she used to be a dietitian. So she really fed us really healthy stuff.
There was something in there, though. I want you to think back on it, and you don't have to know now, but there was something that was it's your body's calling it gluten-ish. So I don't know what is categorized in the gluten-ish category, but that's why I was asking you about boxed pastas. So think about what grandma was feeding you back then, because that's actually what kind of kicked things off. It was something that you were eating, and it actually was creating a microbiome problem.
Could have been homemade bread. She made that often.
It can be the flour. I mean, we have brominated flour, which some people have a severe reaction to the bromates that are in there. And that's probably about the time that they changed it to brominated flour.
Hmm.
All right. So, one of the things that we didn't talk about earlier in terms of things that you can do is I started making my own yogurt, and I absolutely love it. And it's a great way. I have 4 different strains that I make that help to replenish my microbiome. So we talked about how I kind of stopped all supplements. Instead, I make my own yogurt and replenish that microbiome. And I'm working with that to see how that really changes my world.
I used to make my own yogurt too when I was younger. And then I just got too busy and didn't do it anymore. But that was, 30 years ago.
It's a lot easier now. You buy a little yogurt maker. And if anybody wants that information, shoot me an email, and I'm more than happy to send you what I do and how I do it. But it's super simple. But we're working with pulling in a bunch of different bacteria, good bacteria. And one of my favorite is Bifidobacterium infantis, because that's what you got from your mother when you were born.
Mm.
So to me, from what the bodies have told me, that is one of the most important ones.
Lynn, are you seeing a connection between maybe these different events and things that Dr. Liz has been dealing with? It sounds like there was kind of a cascade or a chronology. Are they interrelated to something that she might, of course, discover by going deeper and hopefully find a way to end the cycle?
Yeah, the microbiome problem, I really thought it was going to end up being hormones that created the migraines, but it's actually the microbiome that affected the hormones that created the migraines. So it is a cascade that kind of, kept things going till menopause and started making these other problems. So again, this is like going back to that root, fixing that problem, fixing that microbiome, and then putting the hormones back online. Then we can start changing some of the things.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Liz. Sending you big love. And I meant to jump in when you said problems. I meant to say opportunities. So when you said there's a lot of problems, there's a lot of opportunities for healing and starting a new path forward. And so we thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I want to go to another caller, so we're just going to keep going here. Let me go to Donna. And Donna, I think you had written in early, and I wrote down on a piece of paper, Donna, I said, I'm going to call on you because you had a question about Grover's disease, and you were the first person to write in. So, Donna, explain a little bit to Lynn real quick about what's going on, and we'll just see kind of where this takes us.
Lynn, I went home for 6 months. I thought it was going to be 3 to fight a probate battle in my family. I came back and I had a colonoscopy in October. So I was gone from October 2023 until April. Had a colonoscopy 2024, found 9 polyps. And then that January, I developed a huge rash on my front and back of my torso, front and back of my thighs. I came in with the flu. I also was diagnosed the same day with the flu. And Grover's disease is more prevalent in men, it's more prevalent in hot weather. The doctor was way off. He wasn't anywhere close, but I don't want to have it come up again. And I think the colonoscopy might have kicked it off. Certainly the trauma of going back and seeing what a mess my family was. But what are you getting?
Yeah, I get a no on Grover's.
Okay. I was so mad at that doctor.
But what I do get is that, remember we were talking about how the lining is 1 cell thick, and then it has a big mucosal lining on top of that in the gut. And so with that colonoscopy, that was disturbed. Okay. And when that was disturbed, it opened things up. And now you had a rush of things that made their way out to the body, and your body's way of trying to get rid of it was to push it out, and it came out the skin. Okay. So this was your body's way of actually trying to get rid of toxins, number one, but two, it was also because those junctions opened up and things were able to go through. So there's a part of me that says it's a good thing that your body pushed it out to a rash rather than hold on to it and turn it into an autoimmune. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So let's just make sure that let's check some junctions here. Your mucosal lining is very thin. It should be fluffier and thicker, because that's what keeps things from getting, down to that little one cell and making its way out. So we want to kind of build up that mucosal lining. So a little personal on camera, you don't have to answer, but are you more on the constipated side or are you pretty regular?
I've been working on that, but it's gotten to where I'm back to constipated again. Yes.
Because it's kind of dry in there, and that's so that dryness is really what's kind of drying up that mucosal lining, right? So let's make sure that that we're keeping our hydration. Remember, just water in does not equal hydration, guys. Using some trace minerals good trace minerals in your water, some good sea salt or whatever in a pinch of it in your water really helps to get the water and the electrolytes into the body. Okay, that helps to get the water in, and that equals hydration. Be careful even with the enzymes that you guys are taking. I just put a really disturbing article up on Facebook just yesterday about how a company is buying Porta-John's urinary reserves from the United States, from all over the United States, and they're taking it and distilling it and turning it into urokinase, which then they use to chemically turn into enzymes that everybody's buying for digestive enzymes. So
Wow.
Just be super careful what you're buying in terms of enzymes. So there are certain digestive enzymes I love, but I am definitely going to be doing some more research. So this is one of the
Can I
reasons
make a point on that real quick, Lynn?
Sure.
Because when we talk a lot about structured water and sort of the energy of things, one of the things that always comes up is, you can purify water, you can run it through all sort of, reverse osmosis, triple osmosis, but the frequency of that thing that was in, let's say, the urine or the water is still there. And one of the big things we see these days is, a lot of these water systems that we have, it doesn't go through the natural hydrological cycle anymore. It just goes through filtration. But all the prescription drugs, all the medications, all the things people are taking and excreting out the excess, that energy imprint stays in the water, right? So when you talk about this, I'm like, yikes, what energy imprints are in that? Just mind-boggling. Yeah.
Lynn,
Yep.
can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
I try to take care of things proactively, so I went and had a brain MRI done. I got a study, and I wanted to do it because my mother has dementia now. But ever since I had that brain MRI, my neck has been messed up. And I've gone to massage, I've done restorative yoga, and my neck is messed up. And I really felt the brain MRI did it, and I was in it for an hour. But can you see what's going on
you
with my
need to
neck?
do a radiation detox.
Okay.
We have ones that you can use energetically if you're going to do it supplement wise. Chlorella, spirulina, those both help with radiation. But again,
Thank
be
you.
careful of your sources.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Donna. Sending you love, sending everyone love. I know a lot of you have been writing in. Lynn, I want to go to the energy process we're going to be doing today. And for those people listening to us on X or on Facebook or on Twitter, I'm going to stop the live stream for those folks. If you're in on the Zoom, of course, you're going to get everything. And I'd invite anyone that, is waiting for this process to join us on the link below the live feed that you probably saw when you came on, because you're not going to miss the live